Welcome back to another episode of the EMS
Hey,
Wizard
Mark,
Podcast.
Mark.
What is it, Terry?
Josh is still with us. He
Hey,
that is the vice chairman. That is the vice chairman of the board, and please give him the respect befitting a position of somebody such as that. I'm sorry, Josh,
Is
that
he
you had
the
to.
is he the honorable Josh Holloman?
He could
honorable.
be.
Vice
we
chairman is the honorable.
The
I need to hear.
Oh,
I need to hear some more about
wait.
this
Do
story.
you have a gavel? Not
Hey,
yet.
if you
Maybe.
take the EMS Leadership Academy, you may end up
Oh.
with a gavel.
That's okay.
Teaser.
Little teaser there. I like it. I like it.
Uh, Josh, tell us. So let's start off with this. We've got some stuff, but I've already brought it up. So vice chair for the state EMS administrators. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, hey guys, thanks for having me again. And it was so much fun hanging out with you. I thought I'd do it again. So I appreciate you having me. And I will tell you though, all of that business about my name there, I'll tell you what I tell them around here. It's just Josh. So I appreciate that. But yeah, Terry, as you mentioned, man, what an honor. So I've been voted in as the vice chairman for the next 2 years for the North Carolina Association of EMS Administrators. Such a tremendous group. And I'm looking forward to getting started with that. Looking forward to supporting Rick O'Donnell, who is going in as the chair. Such good things coming, man. I will tell you that for me, my three main goals: professionalism, leadership, and future growth. So those are the three kind of main things that I'm looking at on focusing, and of course, continuing to advance EMS in the state.
Boom. That's
Mic
what I'm
drop.
talking about. It sounds like a tagline for the officer Yeah, it is mic drop. We should end the program on that. It's the shortest program ever. Y'all have a good night. Boop, boop, boop. See you later. Have a good day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we do have some content we want to discuss. So Josh, what's your personal viewpoint on the status of EMS management or the industry as you have seen it in the past and today?
Yeah, well, Mark, man, great question. They're challenges, but I think it's best to look at them as opportunities. And I don't mean to sound cliche, but EMS needs good leadership. They need folks to step up, and anybody can do it when times are good, and and we don't have those challenges. But when you look at things such as how long it's taken to get ambulances these days, when you look at workforce shortages and most places are facing increased call volumes and doing more with less and all of that. I think it's all about perspective, but there's a ton of opportunity out there for EMS managers to step in, provide good leadership, good direction for their agencies. Man, it's an exciting time for me.
I think that's a big thing there. Leadership progressing through the years. When EMS was first established, they really didn't have anybody to hand it to. So in the very beginning, when EMS was really being designed, especially in North Carolina, they had to hand it to somebody. And it's amazing in some of these counties that we visit how much you still see that culture of whatever that started it there, whether it be the influence from a fire service or law enforcement or hospital, emergency management has some influences. That's what makes the diversity of EMS systems in North Carolina specifically unique. I think that's one of the biggest things I've seen is going throughout the state, meeting these partners that we have out there, and from Cherokee even to Dare County, from Brunswick County up into Surrey, even down in Charlotte, all the way up to Northeast North Carolina. It doesn't matter where you go. There's just some diversity there, and their story of how they got to where they are is always interesting to me. So as Josh, as being somebody that has went through promotion processes before, obviously to get to where you are, no one just come up, picked you up by the collar, set you in the seat and said, hey, tag, you're it. Welcome to deputy director world. You had to want to do that. You've obviously found yourself in the position to be now the person sort of driving the EMS vehicle in Johnson County. What are some of the things you hope to have as an influence towards people to inspire them to want to be you one day?
Well, hey man, let me first say I appreciate that, John, but it's a good team. I'm so proud of the team that we have here, and you guys know him. You see him at the conferences. You guys work. Terry's worked a lot with Adam. I know he's teaching with you guys some. But just, I mean, I could go on about our team and everybody doing their job. That's what makes our agency great. But I think that for anyone inspiring, to be a leader of their organization, uh, they have got to, I would say, learn about leadership. Learn that it's not hard, but it can be extremely difficult. And by that I mean it's not complicated, right? It's not complicated, but it can be extremely difficult to do. There's going to be good days and bad days, but you have to hang in there and do the right thing. And so I would encourage them to keep working, keep learning, learn all they can, and try to be, an inspiration for their folks.
What is that a little bit challenging? Is it a little bit different in that emergency services? Looking at JoCo, where you've got emergency management, you've got fire marshal and EMS. That's going to bring some unique challenges with managing maybe the fire marshal's office or emergency management. That's something that might be foreign, and for me that's foreign because my agency doesn't look like that, but there are those agencies. And so what are some things that for you, how do you do that?
Yeah, well, as you said, so we're emergency services department. I know there's several of those around the state. Everywhere does it a little different. So some are standalone EMS departments, some are ES departments like ours, and so for emergency services, as the deputy director, I oversee the three divisions. So EMS being our largest division, but then also the fire marshal's office and emergency management, like you said. And I'll just tell you how I do it. Now, part of it, I would say most of it goes back to having good people in there. I don't have to be an expert on being a fire marshal because we have an absolute rock star of a fire marshal and his entire division. And I don't have to be an expert on emergency management because we have a rock star of emergency management coordinator in her division, and they all do a tremendous job. What I do is try to move barriers when those division chiefs have them. And so obviously the biggest piece of my expertise comes in EMS, and that happens to be our largest operation, where we have the largest amount of employees, where we have the largest amount of our budget. So that's how it goes. But I'll tell you what I did coming in. Now, I had a little bit of a fire background. I've dabbled a little bit on the volunteer side in the fire service, so that wasn't necessarily foreign. And I didn't know anything about investigating fires. So when I was promoted from EMS division chief to deputy director and was going to be tasked with overseeing the EMS division along with the other two divisions, one of the things I wanted to do is go take a fire investigations class. And now I didn't go take, I haven't taken all the classes and got all the certifications, but I did go take the basic class. In North Carolina, they call it FIT, Fire Investigation Technician, because as I told the fire marshal at the time, I want to have a basic understanding of what you do. Now, I'm not going to come in and investigate fires or get in your way, but, when you ask for a widget to do this, I want to be able to support you, or I want to be able to have that conversation with you. So I did that. Same thing on the emergency management side. I went and pursued the North Carolina credential for emergency management because I wanted to be able to have those conversations and provide that support for those divisions. So I think as a leader, you got to step up, show your people that you care about them, show them that you're not afraid to learn more, and to really work a little bit harder if you need to, and then stay out of their way.
I think that's interesting when you say stay out of their way, because I think that is not something that is something that you learn in a classroom. You have to go through an experience as an officer, get in people's way, and then reflect on it, look back and say, man, what's easy? If I shut up and listen. What's easy is if I get out of the way and let them do their job and stuff. And these things where we feel like, I think when we get promoted into these positions, we feel like, hey, we need to be active and do something moving forward. And I've actually found, at least personally speaking, the more I get out of the way and allow folks to sort of do their thing and do more of an active listening piece to that, I've seen a whole lot more success in the team environment when I take that type of approach to it. Do you see the same thing there in Johnson County?
Yeah, I will tell you some of the best advice is to seek first to understand,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
then to be
Mm.
understood. And so, I've had conversations where I felt like, no, I'm right. And it turns out I wasn't right.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And,
Exactly.
and so you seek first to understand. And I think the further you go in leadership and the more people, you're responsible for, I think the more important that is.
Right. And I think they see that in you. Mark, it was something you was telling me the other day, very similar to that, where you were talking about the, sort of getting out of people's way just to watch people do those things. Is that the same strategy you look for, at least from a training officer lens?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got to be able to transition from that primary pre-hospital provider
Yeah.
to that supervisor that can just stand back and support that paramedic, support that EMT and what they're doing, you know. And it's the same thing whenever we're looking at improving our employees and watching them grow and helping them grow and putting them into those situations and just letting them do it. You know, sometimes that's where the most value comes out of education, is not just reading the book or getting that information, but it's doing it.
Did you just say, in a Duplin County way, be a beacon of light, like Terry says about his lighthouse? The beacon.
Yes, that be the light to shine this little light of mine so that you can lead them and protect them.
And that's why he's not going to have a chapter in the book, Walter.
Terry, you just give it to me and I'll write it for you. If he doesn't want you in there, just give it to me and I'll write it for you.
Walter GPT.
Yeah. I thought there was a guy out in Cherokee GPT, who did all of this stuff for you.
The guy in Cherokee he actually conveys messages very well for me. All I do is tell him, I say, Zach, I need you to write my feelings, and he puts my feelings out there for me to share with the rest of the guys.
That sounds like a third best friends, but labels are for soup cans, and so I don't have time for this. Josh, I get a follow-up question to your leadership stuff that you were talking about, and my question for you is politics. And sometimes we think of that as a dirty word, where you were talking about, constantly learning, constantly engaging. And there was a class that I was at a couple of weeks ago where they were talking about politics, and some folks in the room said, whoa, like that's a dirty word. But I think that's one of the things maybe some EMS leaders don't realize or don't think about. So how did you come about learning some of that politics? How did you learn, hey, why it's necessary to be a bit of a politician?
Yeah, well, to talk about politics in the sense of working with political figures, that's the thing, is you have to understand, as a government-based EMS agency, we're only going to be as good of a department as our elected leaders will allow us to be. And so without their support and without their funding, we're not going to be able to be successful. And so that's another area where we're very blessed in Johnston County, because we have a board of commissioners who are very supportive of us, so much so that in their strategic objectives, they have public safety listed in there. And they've really come through with some of their actions in recent years. And every year at budget time, when we ask for the things and show the projects, and they're very supportive. But the thing about it is that doesn't just happen. And so, as you mentioned, Terry, with politics, that as you move up into management positions within agencies, you have to understand that that's part of the job. And most likely, your elected officials, they're going to hear something about your agency. And so you need to be the one to tell your story, because someone's going to tell it. And they're going to get the phone calls when the citizens are mad. So also make sure you're telling them about all the good things you're doing, and about the lives you're saving, and the good PR you had, and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think sharing your story, sharing your information, is a way to get ahead of all the bad stuff, and to gain that support from your political figures. But as far as the politics go, it comes with the position as you continue to move up.
Politics can help you or they can hurt you. So the helping part of the politics is, just like you said, getting out there and letting them know, if you try to ignore the politics, it's going to hurt you.
Oh yeah, don't ignore it for sure, because it's like the news media. They're getting their story. It's gonna, whether you participate or not,
Correct.
the story is there. So you better participate.
That's right.
When you look at EMS and leadership as it exists now, Josh, how do you see that changing in the future? I mean, what do you think it's going to take? I always say that we're standing at a crossroads of EMS, and it's going to look very different in many different directions. We don't know what that's going to look like, but at least from the seat that you're sitting in, how do you see that in the future? What do you see leadership has to look like in the future to get us through these crossroads?
Yeah, John, I'll tell you, I'm inspired. I'm inspired, and the reason I am, where it first started to hit me is when you guys first started doing these officer classes, and I would go to some of our stations, and I would hear some of our paramedics say, "Hey, I took this really good class this weekend, and I went to wherever they went to take the class," and in some cases across the state.
That's right.
So, there was a time when I was, I was sitting here and I'm kind of, well, hey, we don't have anyone interested in moving up, for the pay or whatever the reason being. But when I started hearing that, I got very, very excited. And that's just increased, over the last couple of years. We've had people go try to find that, go to your classes. And then of course we've had good, good attendance as you guys have come here local and have done the classes. So I'm inspired at the next generation. I felt old recently, so we were actually thinking about this Asheville conference coming up. And for the first time, I sat back and thought, okay, am I doing my part of bringing in the next generation? And so we got to talking about that topic. And at this conference, we're bringing one of our battalion chiefs, because we're starting to realize that I'm not going to be, I hope I'm doing it for a long time, but it's not going to be forever, and there needs to be someone else coming behind. And I think about the chief here when I was training officer, who took me to the first conference in Wilmington. And I just, wow, I thought, just how I mean, it's a big deal, and so I'm excited that we're going to be doing that soon. And I think doing that kind of stuff is so important for us to pass it on.
Yeah, there's a story that Terry tells that I think is fascinating. And usually I have stuff that I'm doing when we're doing these classes together, but I like to hear the story he tells about how he ended up the deputy ops chief where he's at. And it was one of those transitions that happened very quickly. And it speaks to preparation, and you talk about, do I have time to prepare? Terry, do you mind telling that story about how you ended up in that position? Because it was like, boom, here it is.
Yeah, I had worked for my agency for, at that point, about 19 and a half years. And a promotional opportunity came up, and, funny how all roads lead back to training. And one of the statements that I use when I talk to people is, if training is being run well, and if operations is being run well, that's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And once you put it together, you pull it apart, you got operations in your training, and you got training in your operations. And so I got promoted to deputy chief of training. And the guy who was the ops deputy chief had been with the agency 30 plus years. And he had been mayor pro tem of one of our local towns. He had been a small business owner, and this really was a fellow who I looked up to, and just that Southern gentleman, and where he would just kind of talk slow, choose his words very carefully, and I thought, man, I'm going to learn a ton of things from this guy while my office is across the hall from him. And then one day we went to lunch. And our boss sat us down, and she said to me, well, Terry, George has something that he'd like to tell you. And I was just kind of confused, and I said, okay. And he said, dude, I'm going to retire. And I said, yeah, Chief George and I, we had talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that, George probably in 2 to 3 years that he's going to retire, and, he's got a lot to offer. And she said, Terry, you're not listening. And he said, dude, I'm retiring at the end of next month. And it was like 5 weeks. And I said, what? And he said, I've been called on a mission. I'm going to South America to go be a missionary. And where I tell people, I will argue with a lot of people, but Jesus is not one of the people who I would argue with. And suddenly I felt like a man on fire because I had 5 weeks to, how can I soak up every piece of information from this guy that's been doing this for so long, who I so much looked up to, that really knew how the sausage was made, who knew those politics, who knew the people. And that for me was running into a brick wall. How do we do this? And so, yeah.
And I think that's important. Josh, do you realize you're George? Do you realize that it's possible? There's people there. Do you realize that they're probably trying to soak up as much of you as they can before one day you're not going to be there? And I don't know that maybe George realized that, or my mentors or anybody else's mentors. It's hard for us to sit in the seat and say we're that person. It's someone else that thinks that, not us. So, I mean, how do you see that?
So one of the things we're big on in our department is pride and ownership.
Yeah.
And we teach that to our field, to everyone, but we teach it on our first day with our field employees, because we want them to treat the ambulance like they own it, like they pay for it with their own money. Treat the monitor like you pay for it with your own money, that kind of thing. As you move up in the department, pride and ownership is still important. I treat my vehicle as if I pay for it with my own money, try to keep it clean, take care of it, all of that kind of stuff. But you have to also realize that everything that we're doing, that we don't own it. Okay. And so, like I said, pride and ownership is still important. But as a manager and as a leader, you have to, as part of you has to remember that we don't own it. And so what that means is I'm not going to be sitting here forever. So I've got to think about how can I do the best I can while I'm here, and then, as you said, pass it on to have folks prepared to pick it up, because it's an infinite game. It keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. Luckily, if we do everything right, it keeps going.
That's right.
Still keep rolling. It doesn't stop when I leave or any of you guys leave. I think that's an important perspective for us to have in our positions, and I think it changes the way we treat every day.
Yeah. What kept you going, Walter? I mean, you've been in it a long time and in the same place. A little different than, it's easy to explain why you stay in the Outer Banks. That's easy. But you've stayed married to your county pretty religiously too, Walter. So, I mean, what inspired you to keep doing that?
I think that, it's the community I live in, so the community I want to serve. And, I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, I go to the beach. Beach is next door to us. So, yeah, I can go to the beach. But, I'm still at the community in which I serve and have I don't know what you want to call it, to be able to still help this community that I still live in. From being on a EMS ambulance as a paramedic, I saw new people. I can go to the grocery store and know somebody. I went to Lowe's today and knew 3 people in Lowe's while I was there today, just because I knew those people in the community, to going up to be a supervisor, training officer, assistant director, things like that, to now being the program coordinator at the college. It's still, I want to be able to help the people that I'm here. It was funny that Josh said, that pride and the ownership of their vehicles, and start out with that on day one. I try to instill that in students on day one. I don't want you to change your treatment options because of what I'm telling you, but what I'm going to tell you is important, because you need to know how much medications cost. You need to know how much it costs for a cardiac monitor. You need to know how much this mannequin costs. You need to know how much this cardiac monitor costs. You need to know how much this ambulance costs, because you're going to go ride on it. And, if I can make a difference in 1 or 2 students with that goes back to, say, Josh's, or I'll use Terry, because Terry is in our service area. If I can instill that into 1 or 2 students that go back to Terry, they already have that when they come in. Then they have that same sense of ownership and, this is my community that I want to serve. I pay taxes for this vehicle to be able to do that. I think it's just the community that you serve. And I'll go back to my volunteer days because of that.
But that's politics too. That when
it's
you're
politics, it
right?
is.
And that's what makes, when you're indwelled in a community like that, like Josh is not, like Terry, And like you, Walter, I think that's politics. And Mark, you're probably the same way. You're
Well, that's
very
what I was going to
similar.
say.
Yeah.
Mark, from the conversations he and I have had, has that same, experience of this is the system. This is the place that he's grown up with.
Yeah, it's home.
And that it's that, yes, I think you have that purer motivation of, I want to help. This is my community. This is where I live. These are the people who I want to help out. And that's one of the things, where it's funny, where I tease Walter every time I drive through the road that he grew up on. I'd send him a Snapchat on Wait Station Road. But I think of that every time that I go through. I think of that actually when I was going through Duplin County a couple of weeks ago and had a brief phone call with Mark. So tell us, I interrupted, but tell us
please,
about that.
Terry, tell us what Mark thinks. We would really like to know from Terry's perspective, Mark's story. Mark, you sit there and you don't say nothing. Terry, you tell us Mark's story from Duplin County. Go ahead, we'll wait. Oh no, okay, so Mark.
Yes, please, thank you.
I bet you if Keith was here, he could tell us about it.
Tell us about John's story.
But no, just from my perspective, I see where, there's so much value in really, investing back into your community and being a part of your community, serving your community in the way that, I've been at the same EMS agency for a little over 15 years now, and this has always been home. But I can see also where there's a little bit of shift. There's a transition where, a lot of the people that, we have working with us, they're homegrown, but there's probably just as many that is from somewhere else. Right. And so how do you motivate and inspire those individuals that doesn't come in with that homegrown mentality, that pride and ownership that's already kind of in place by default? Josh, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think everybody brings in their own personal values, and some of they may not necessarily value the place because it's where they grew up and where it's home, but there's other reasons they can value their job as a paramedic and want to be the best they can be wherever they're at. And so I absolutely agree with that. We most of the people, a lot of the people we hire today are not from here. But we tell them we want them to have their personal values, but also adopt the department values, which includes pride and honor and integrity and all of that kind of stuff. So we tell them why it matters. And also, here's another thing. They may not know the history of the system, but us as the leaders of the place, we make sure that the history of the system is known, is important. And so we've got some projects that we're going to be announcing soon for that, because remember, we're only a couple years in of being one agency. And so in 2021, we consolidated our last two rescue squads. So it took us a series of 13 years to do that. So, now that we're one agency, we want to make sure that we don't forget those rescue squads and all the people who came before, and even the folks we hire who don't know any of those names. They're going to know that it was important to this place to get us where we are today.
That's cool.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I was just saying that's cool. I like the fact that somebody takes that tradition and remembers it. I was fascinated with
that history part.
Yeah.
Well, there's in Brunswick County, that's actually on page 1 of their protocols, is a brief 3 or 4 paragraph thing talking about the history of the system. And they were quick to say, hey, just like what Josh was saying, that the folks who are coming in the door, they're not going to know, but they're going to know that it's important, and it's important for us to remember the sacrifices that these individuals made in their time, in their sweat, in their time in serving their community.
But we want our new people to know that their contribution here is going to matter. And if you come in the door and we never acknowledge the folks who've come before, then you kind of have to question yourself. And so we do it it's as much for the folks who are here today and next year and the next year as it is for the folks who were here in the previous years, because we really hope that for some it will, for some it won't, but we hope for some that it will inspire them to say, hey, I can have a lasting impact on this system as well.
So going back to that little road that I used to live on, Terry, this this March made probably 30 years that I've been with that agency. And 30 years is a long time, John. Yes, 30 years is a long time. That's
You're old.
including my junior years that I was there. But
Wait, have
that's
you
why,
been with that agency for all 30 years?
yes,
In one form or fashion?
I have never left that agency for 30 years. That is where I started. If they probably were a paramedic agency in 1997, 1998, 99, I would not have left that agency. They were still a EMT basic level agency. I probably would not have left them if they had a paramedic level agency at that point in time. So yes, 30 years, and I still work part-time there today because of that. It's a piece of my heart that I can't let go. And my wife is like, why do you need to go? I was like, I need to go because it's still a part of me. It's still a part of me. I've got to go.
John, would you know what it was like to spend 30 years in some place?
He would have no clue. Don't even ask me. Keith probably can help you better than John can.
Josh, we really do appreciate you coming on here the last couple of weeks and stuff. And I just got one final question. Please share with us. Who is your best friend?
Well, look at the time. Thanks, guys.
Josh, labels are for soup cans, and so whether they're firsts or somebody should come up with something. I think as Zach said last night, that somebody should come up with a way that you could pick your top 8 best friends. That might be
something that really got into my space.
Yeah.
Whatever. Josh, I will tell you thank you. It is always great listening to you. It was great listening to you over the last 2 episodes, just so you know. It has been wonderful. I always get something from you. I like to hear you talk. I like to hear your positive energy and motivation. I appreciate you coming up here with us.
Means a lot. Thanks.
I'm sure if not for you, we wouldn't have got that one more subscriber. Thank you, Josh.
And it's interesting hearing about Selma. I didn't know there was EMS there. There's train tracks there, and Selma is the crossroads of the north-south and the east-west of train tracks in the state of North Carolina. Billy Ray Langston is who taught me this. And so there's a lot
every October we celebrate Railroad Days in the town of Selma. So expect to see you down here.
Okay.
Terry, I'll come with you. We'll go have fun with trains together.
That's what best friends do.
I was getting ready to ask John, did somebody need to check his pulse, but he did come back to life. So
you stopped talking about trains. I immediately resuscitated myself.
Oh, okay.
Keith was there to take care of him.
That's right. Pull that fluid out of your eye. Nasty.